Nathan, welcome back to the Awake Nation. How are you?
Now, how you doing, David and Penny?
Good.
How are you?
So pumped to be here. It's an exciting day to be alive.
It is. Every day is an exciting day to be alive.
That's right.
If I wake up, it's an exciting day to be alive.
Any day above ground.
That's right.
That's it. There's a lot of days I didn't. I wanted to talk if I could for a minute about self-sufficiency, homesteading, survival, that kind of just genre of life and happiness. For those of you that don't know, my wife and I, we sold our house. We were like many of y'all who are watching this, who were looking around at the society that we were living in and watching it, just the cracks were growing in the bridges. You know what I mean? You're starting to realize that there is some foundational problems going on with this whole entire empire that we live in. And we wanted out, we wanted to unplug from that system. And we really had this like idealistic dream that came from, watching way too much YouTube, that we could just go cut it out on a homestead and just live vibrantly and passionately and free. And so, back at the time we were living in Colorado and we were looking at properties all over the mountains and trying to find springs and water. Colorado is basically a desert. Sometimes it has a different look or a veneer like it's not, but it's totally a desert. And so we were like, that would be so wonderful. Let's do it. And for years, we were really hindered in that. We were praying and interceding constantly for like a way out of that system, but we just couldn't for so long. And so eventually what we ended up doing is we sold our home and we bought an RV and we started traveling around the country. Now, originally, we had no idea what we were doing. We were just kind of wanderers out there on the road. We did a playlist on our YouTube channel or also on our Rumble channel now, which is the LinenRailroad, and called Rolling with the Reynolds, where we documented a lot of our travels and our journeys in the very beginning. We also have a series that's on there called Farming with the Reynolds. And that was really what changed our lives most drastically, because we didn't actually know what we were doing. And most people, y'all that have that desire and that tenacity and that fun, who grew up in the civilized world, the city life, to try to enter into, survival without any real experience is deadly stuff. And y'all, like the foundational point of what I'm hoping to be able to share with you guys, it's just some of the experiences and the hard-learned lessons that I learned from not only my life and experiences, but mostly from those of the people that I lived with. Because we had that RV, we started living on the properties of different people. And we ended up doing 150,000 miles of traveling around this country. And because of that, we got to see a lot of mistakes, like a lot of really bad decisions that played out exponentially.
Mistakes of people who are trying to live off the grid?
Yes. Now, not entirely off the grid. I'll just say this. We only visited, I think, one property that somebody was really trying to be off the grid. Most of these people understood that they were still part of the grid, but they were working their way off of that. And we went to small homesteads. We went to, like an acre or less than an acre in size homesteads. We went to ones that were also like small farms, small scale natural farms that were like 10, 20 acres in size. And then we ended up going up to bigger size properties in ranches. Like I ended up being a farm manager on a 50-acre ranch down in Central Texas, where I tried to apply a lot of these lessons that I learned over the last few years, especially with methodologies like what's called restoration agriculture, a guy named Mark Shepard. And maybe I can do a screen share. Let's see if I can.
Sure.
If I can, that would be great. Maybe you have to enable it. Do you have to enable it, Penny?
Well, no, you enable it, and then I'm the one that brings it.
And then you bring it onto just like you brought yourself in.
Yeah.
Into the green room, and then we bring that in.
Okay. I don't know what you mean.
So you share it. Says
you go to present, and then it'll say.
Oh, thank you. I got you. I'm tracking with you. Sweet. Let's jump on this thing. Here we go. So I'll just share with you guys some of the folks that were like instrumental in this process. Paul Gauchi here. There's a documentary right here, which is called Back to Eden. And okay, so one of the first properties that we actually saw some like moderate success on was actually that 1 acre homestead. And this was in Asheville, North Carolina. It was not outside of the cities in the rural mountains, y'all. This was like on a highway. And because they were on the highway, they looked at it as like a resource, as opposed to being like in the dreaded, like, I know a lot of people want their private redoubt where they can like, retreat to. Let's just be honest. You guys kind of want to run away and get away from everything, which would be great. I understand, but it's not reality for most people. And so this is a documentary that was put out, which is chronicling this man's journey here. His name is Paul Gauchi. And what his methodology was utilizing was a composition of mulching and wood, like taking wood chips and mulch and compost and adding that into layered in, because he was trying to recreate nature. What he saw in nature that was very successful and worked was he didn't have to water everything. Is my screen coming through there? Maybe you guys can't see.
Yeah, you haven't played it yet, but I mean, it shows that you're on YouTube. So,
see, it's playing on my side. Maybe I'll just stop this.
Oh, it is?
Hold on. Yeah.
we're not.
You don't have headphones
That's okay.
on,
We'll just jump off of that. What's that?
Yeah, usually it won't play through if you have headphones on, but you don't have headphones on.
No, that's okay. I'll just tell you guys anyways. I'll just tell you the name of it. It's called Back to Eden. You can look this up. It's a very popular documentary now at this point. But when we got to this one property, it was 1 acre. This lady had goats and she had chickens predominantly were like the main thing. But what had happened is somebody had taken their topsoil, and they had sold it before they bought their property. Like their soil was literally stripped away from them. And so like the core tenets of this that you're going to run into is building back your soil, trying to get the nutrients back in your soil. This book right here, which is written by Gabe Brown, Dirt to Soil, is a really helpful book to try to understand like how to make soil happier and healthier, so that when you eat stuff that comes out of it, you're happier and healthier. And that is one of the areas that are most nutritionally deficient in, is like these minerals. And so there's another guy named Dan Wigington, who's from the Living Bio Web. And he had Bionutrient Food Association is his website. And they were all about remineralizing the soil. And one of the most incredible benefits of being able to do that is you can generally get wood chips and mulch, especially in the wetter side of the country, for free. And so she put out a sign that just said mulch wanted, dump here. And what would happen is guys who are chopping down trees and arborists, I call them tree assassins because they're incredible humans who climb giants and cut them to pieces. It's amazing. It's the most dangerous job in the United States. It's tremendous humans. Anyways, they would drop their mulch either at a place that they had to pay money to do it, or they would drop them at this gal's farm, her little property. And so what I would do is I would take a wheelbarrow, and they would leave this mountain of wood chips. And I would take this wheelbarrow and I would just fill up on top of the dirt. We would lay down cardboard to basically create a weed mat, so that all of the weeds that were there, so if it was just bare soil or if it was weeds that were already there, it would block the sun out from the weeds and it would kill them off. And then we would layer that up with like 8 inches of this fresh mulch. And what happens is, as that begins to break down, all of this rhizome, basically the active layer underneath the soil where all this activity is taking place, where there's like a constant warfare down beneath our feet that we just don't even notice because we walk around and we don't think about it. So when we look out at grass, that is like a very acidic environment. That's why we have grasses that are there. But as a soil matures over time, it will become much more, it'll become more mature. Like when you walk into a forest, there's that rich, lush smell when you walk in there, and that's a more a fungal dominant, and it's the pH is beginning to shift in that area. And what happens is that soil has so much more nutrients that's available because there's a healthy soil web of life that's happening underneath the soil. So by taking mulch and putting it on top of there, what happens is you're jump starting that process. And this is a way to circumvent having to go get dependent on the cash flow system. When we went to a different farm that was in southern Florida, that was it was a for-profit farm that was trying to grow orchards. So they had like fruit trees, citrus trees, predominantly like oranges and papayas and mangoes. It was a beautiful, incredible farm. And in between, he was planting row vegetables. You know, he was raising kale and he was raising tomatoes and all of these other crops in between it. But it was a very high input farm. It required thousands and thousands of dollars every month to put in amendments into the soil in order to kind of jumpstart that system. And so as we were going along on this journey, we were really looking for ways to do it without all the expenditures. Time and labor are going to be your biggest expenditures. Now, financially, you're also going to have a major expenditure that there's no way to get around as you're trying to establish it. But we were really trying to find a way that was replicatable to people that don't have necessarily the greatest amount of wealth going into it. Because a lot of folks, as they start to learn this information, they want to go out and get their own land. They want to start something, even if it's in their backyard. And so why I try to direct people towards the Back to Eden method is because of all of the farms that we went to, of all of the properties that we went to, that was the most successful of any that we saw. Long term, it had the greatest ROI. It was the greatest return of investment of any that we saw. It increased fertility over time. And another major component that came in to that equation was utilizing wood ash and biochar, which is like a product of basically extreme heat without oxygen in an environment. It creates charcoal, but it's a format that allows all of those bugs under the soil to have real estate to live in. And so you can charge up that charcoal, that biochar, with composted material like manure and human manure, and you can preload those little nuggets, and they will dispense out that nutrients for thousands of years. There's this place that's down in the Amazon. The Amazon jungle, y'all, is not fertile. I know it looks super green and super lush, but the soil itself is very devoid of nutrients. Almost all of the nutrients of the Amazon are literally in the leaves and the actual plant material that's above the surface. And so the way that you try to farm in the Amazon, one method that you can try is to slash and burn, where they cut everything down, you burn it in a big pile, and then you plant into that area. That will give you a jump start of some fertility for a couple of years. However, it won't last very long. But then there's this other area of the Amazon that they were excavating, and they started finding black soil. And I'm not talking about just like dark soil. I'm talking about supercharged, charcoal rich biochar soil. And it was deep, super deep. And what they were wondering is how, and there was a distinct line, like they could see that people had cut and built out a territory and planted crops in this area, and the fertility, and they mine the soil out to this day and sell it all over, because what they were doing is they were creating biochar. They were laying down all of those limbs and branches and tree plant material, and then they were smothering it, starting a fire and smothering it. And they were creating this biochar. And what would happen is that fertility of that soil here, thousands of years later, is still just as high. I believe it's called Delgado soil. I can't remember the name right now. But that soil is so fertile that today you can still plant crops in it that yield exponentially more than the soil that's directly on the other side of that line. And so this led into a very big industry about the biochar. And I encourage y'all, this is one of the most exciting little pieces that you can add to your toolkit. You can make your own biochar little reactor, which is out of a 55-gallon drum with another 55-gallon drum inside of it. That will work for a good long while to make and generate your own biochar. But by just adding some of those components into your toolkit, it will give you a jump start on your soil's overall fertility that has great returns long term. So though the back to Eden methodology that we got to see down on that little homestead, we planted out basically like 1/8 of an acre, and we just planted tomatoes directly down into that. And I did row, tomato gardening, like, and weaving the tomatoes between, and it was like, to me, to get to see somebody who didn't have all of the infrastructure, they didn't have the expenditures to put into it for irrigation and fertilization and they didn't have any of that. I literally was cutting down bamboo from their property and using it as stakes to create a little architecture to hold up these tomato vines. And during the course of that summer, it didn't rain for 2.5 months, and those plants thrived. They thrived. There was no need to water because that mulch was delivering out moisture as the plants needed it. And it was an incredible eye-opening experience for me at that time in my life to see that there's a way we can mimic nature that's so much more successful long-term than it was to try to make nature fit our wishes and our desires. And so as I traveled around the country, I also learned that one of the key tenets of this, a guy named Mark Shepard, who wrote a book called Restoration Agriculture. That book details his journey on buying what was basically a soybean and corn farm in Wisconsin and starting to implement these practices to create a food system that mimicked what used to be out here. The United States, North America, used to have a very productive food forest around all over our country, and they were called oak savannas. And so we used to have these big grassy plains with big mammals that would run around and stomp down trees. Mammoths, we used to call them, right? Mastodons, and these incredible herbivores like bison and buffalo that were roaming around everywhere. We used to have these, and there were islands of these big prairies and grasses of trees and shrubs and plants, and they were elderberries and currants and gooseberries and huckleberries, and they were chestnuts and acorns, and there was these layered systems that were capturing all of the sunlight and consolidating it into food energy for all of these animals and the people that used to live here. And so before man came over here, Western European style culture of farming, they would slash and burn those areas and plant out their gardens and their vegetable gardens the way that they did it. And by doing that, we greatly began to reduce the soil, the topsoil layer that used to be here. The highest layers of of active organic soil matter that have ever been found in the world were found in the Mississippi, Ohio River Valley system, in these areas, 100 to 200 foot deep. And that battery bank in the grain belt, as we call it here in the United States, that battery bank of the soil health has literally just been depleted and depleted and depleted here over the last century because of the practices of farming that we implement today. And so I'm trying to find ways, and a lot of other farmers are trying to find ways of how do we rebuild that soil layer? How do we get that back? And the way to do that is to mimic what we saw back there. And that's really what Mark Shepard is doing. And he is using animals, cows and pigs and multi-species animals, to come in and imitate those same cycles of where animals would come through in a massive herd like bison, any prey animal like bison. They are controlled and moved by predators. This is why wolves are such an important part, an integral part of the system for the food web. Because when you have these big herbivores and they go through and they rapidly eat down an area and they trample down the grasses and they poop and pee everywhere. This book, Grass-Fed Cattle, which is written by Julius Rochelle, this book goes through a lot of like the actual physiology of a cow and of herbivores and how they're made to do this. Even just the way the grass cycle. This is what I'm talking about, how that's herd animals right there. That's how prey animals will get tightened up like that. You see, that is super high intensity. Like if you have that many cows in an acre of land, they can eat that grass down super fast. And then what you do is you move them off of it really quickly. And so another gentleman who did a tremendous job at helping to coach me in a lot of this was a guy named Greg Judy. His book here is called No Risk Ranching and Custom Grazing on Leased Land. He had a big principle of a desire to help people get started without owning their own land, because land is a very expensive, it's the biggest expenditure that you're going to have. So leasing land was his big weapon that he utilized. And I advocate for others to go and get to know their neighbors. Go and get to know, it doesn't even have to be the person you live next door to. I'm talking about other people, mankind, people that you can learn to network with, because a lot of land is not being utilized. There's a lot of landowners, and you can look this information up. There's beautiful things called assessor offices and GSIs. There's tax records that you can go and find out the names of people that own land that's sitting there not being utilized, and you can write letters to them. I encourage people to physically write out a letter to these people and tell them what it is you're wanting to do. Tell them how you want to be a steward of their land and advocate a system of improving their landscape. I mean, there's a reason when the city parks look the way they do, because people mow that down and they maintain all of that. They work hard to make it look like that. Cows do that just fine. You can put cattle in a fenced in property and they will begin to cultivate it like that. But if you do high intensity grazing, like Greg Judy talks about in this book, basically what you're doing is you're trying to imitate the wolves, where you consolidate the animals into a tiny space. And he does it through high tensile electric fencing, consolidate the animals into a very tiny constrained space, and then you move them constantly. So every day, maybe 2 days, you're moving them over the course of your pastures. And as you do that, what you're doing is you're imitating that system where the grass gets eaten down, a bunch of the top portion of the grass, the really healthy, happy teenager sized grass gets eaten off. And when you do that, the grass gets stimulated with all these growth hormones inside it, basically to launch a whole other wave of it. And by doing that, when a cow's tongue tugs on the grass, it stimulates the roots to go deeper. It tells them to go mine the soil more and more and more to get closer to water sources. And so you create that food web gets increased exponentially. And a cow's also peeing 55 gallons, like tens and dozens of gallons of urine every single day, which is nitrogen rich. And then they're pooping out these, I mean, it's $1 a brick patty coming out of their rear end, y'all, a perfect fertilizer that's just liquid gold. When they do that and you don't keep them consolidated on that property for too long, when you move them off of it, that jumpstarts this incredible process of restoration into that landscape. And in a matter of a few years, you're starting to add inches of topsoil back into it. Whereas all the climate scientists would like to say it takes thousands of years to regenerate an inch of organic matter.
So you're saying it can be done a lot faster.
You can jumpstart it within a matter of a few years with some of these processes like I'm talking about here. And these were some of the people that really helped to open my eyes to that there is hope. That, like there's some really bad stuff that's been going on out there. It's like big agriculture exists. I understand why it exists. However, the core tenets of it is a solution that can absolutely be fixed by people taking over responsibilities to grow food themselves, to raise animals themselves, and to have some sweat equity in their life. To get sweat equity, it makes a huge difference for you when it comes to the eating your bread to satisfaction, Nothing tastes better than a meal that you are a participant in the process of making it. That's why a home cooked meal for a family to sit down and eat together is very impactful. It's like a covenant. It's like a relational tie. There's a reason people used to break bread in one another's houses and share meals together. And the fast food culture and the fast food ideology has raped our identity of that. And it's systemically destroyed our families, but it's also destroyed our relationships with our neighbors, with our friends. And we think there's an illusion of relationship because we can do it through these black mirrors, but there's nothing more powerful than breaking bread together with each other. It's beautiful. And when you do that over meals that you guys were participants in laboring for, it's even more rewarding. And so there's one last little venue that I found to be actually incredibly rewarding and satisfying and a lot more profitable. I'll just be honest here. You're going to lose a lot of money in the beginning phases of trying to do this. That's okay. For those of you that are trying to make money, y'all, Microgreens was the door out of the entire system for me. When I figured out that I didn't have to battle pests and weather and predators on all of this stuff. I was on properties that were investing $10,000 a month, $14,000 a month trying to build it up. And in the building phase, that's kind of part of it. But Microgreens is something that people can start at home in a space on a desk and be able to start to generate some of the most nutrient dense produce that you can have. Microgreens, for those of you that don't know, you take seeds and you sprout them out, okay, in like, so you don't even have to be basically healthy soil, like, because they don't need the soil. The seed is packed with something called the germ inside of it. And inside of that layer is all the nutrients that it needs in order to get started and jumpstart its little life and put out those first little tiny leaves. And once it does that, then it starts collecting energy from the sun. Then it starts using the soil health, the nutrients out of the soil. But when you sprout out all of those seeds, whether it's alfalfa seeds or radish seeds or sunflower seeds or broccoli seeds, when you sprout those things out and they start to put out these little tiny leaves, when they put those out, they are in most cases 28 times more nutrient dense than the mature counterparts of broccoli that you're going to go buy at the store. Microgreens are one of the most readily available and home-based models of making food in your houses. And it keeps you out of all of those other challenges that are going to come your way. And so there's a guy who's got a YouTube channel called Growing Fruition. His name is Tyler Blom. He's an incredible entrepreneur in this industry as well, who has been advocating a way of doing this for people that want to get started in it. And honestly, I've watched people make $1,000 up to $4,000 a week doing that system and doing a subscriptions-based system where customers, you go out and collect your customers, but not necessarily the farmer's market model. But I have seen people be very successful in that methodology. For those of you that are trying to look as a way of generating revenue through something that you grow, I really encourage you to take a long, hard study at Microgreens. I wish I'd found it sooner. I'll just be super transparent with you. I've been on the struggle bus with farming with many other families out there, and I've seen it would be a lot more advantageous to start with a winning option. And they sprout in 7 days. You go from seed to harvest in 7 days, and it's very successful in that regards. But long-term reward of like leaving an inheritance to your children and your children's children. This is why when you grow properties and you raise properties and transform them into something beautiful, you're literally creating something that generations of people can enjoy and be satisfied by. Those properties like Greg Judy manages, he started out leasing a lot of these lands. He got leases for life. A lot of them he leases for $1 a year. And he's turned those into making and grazing cattle that he can now sell for some of them for $5,000 a head. He makes a tremendous amount of profit doing this. And it takes time and energy and hard work. And you know what? That's a good and satisfying reward for those that are willing to embark upon that journey. And I hope those of you that are interested in that would check out some of these resources and go and experience what it's like to work by the sweat of your face to eat bread, because that's what men were made to do. And it's a powerful lesson in life that only the soil and the sun are going to teach you. So thank you guys so much for having me on. It's always a joy to be here. And I look forward to seeing y'all again soon.
All right. If people want to contact you, Nathan, for more information about some of this stuff, do you have an email address people can reach you at?
Yes, they can reach me at snatchedfromtheflames@protonmail.com. Snatched from the Flames. Looks like this. There's the book I wrote. It doesn't talk about farming very much. This was before that. So.
No, it doesn't. We've come so far from that. However, now you're doing a lot of good for a lot of people, and I like this. People are really getting into. Do you think one of the times you come on here, we could talk about addressing hydroponics a little bit?
You bet. You bet.
Right. Maybe we'll do that next time. Nathan, thank you for being with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Nathan.
Hi, Nathan Reynolds here on the Awake Nation. Snatched from the Flames is the name of the book, and his website, snatchedfromtheflames.com. Okay, check it out. Those of you who never saw the first interview that we ever did with Nathan, you'll be very surprised at what his backstory is. But he's a good guy. He's a good guy now. Okay, so but he a lot of interesting stuff.